Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 631. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
My name is Zach.
We're here to talk movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. And everyone's been asking for it, guys. So here we are, talking Three Musketeers, a suite of them.
Yeah, people have practically been begging for us to do these two movies. I mean, it's really been on everyone's wish list for a while.
Right. We don't read the emails on the air because there's so many. But like I would say weekly, we get a when are you doing 1973 Michael York Three Musketeers? And the people have asked, and everyone, you're in luck.
All right.
Today's the day.
I feel a little shameless chasing after, the popular option, with this episode, but
I know we're really going for the YouTube algorithm with this pick this week. So yeah, if this doesn't blow up, I don't know what the point. I don't know why.
Although, have you guys noticed, according to the YouTube algorithm, we need to talk about The Postman more often.
Yeah, that's short. When
did we have a short that went big?
It's got like thousands of views.
Right?
Really?
Yeah, it's like 5,000 views. Us talking about if The Postman is sci-fi or not.
Nice. Awesome.
All right. Well, let's trick the algorithm. And so, Zach, let's talk about the sci-fi movie, The Postman.
No.
What's your favorite sci-fi
This podcast
element
has
of
talked
that?
about the Postman enough. I
Right.
don't even care
Are
about
you-
the views.
Are you saying The Postman is sci-fi? Because I disagree, Kyle.
I mean, any movie with Tom Petty of the Heartbreakers in it has to be sci-fi.
Or fantasy.
Oh, could be. Is that the fantasy everyone dreams of? A post-apocalyptic future with Kevin Costner delivering mail?
That was my first exposure to Tom Petty, was that movie.
Not his music?
No. I found out later that he was famous for some reason.
And you're like, oh, he's a musician too?
Well, they make a joke in movie.
About him playing music?
No, about like he was mayor and it's like, oh yeah, he used to be somebody or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Is that the
So then I
only
looked it up
movie
on
he's
Encarta.
Is that the only movie he starred in?
I mean, starred's a strong word.
Been in, appeared in.
No, that is definitely not the only movie Tom Petty has appeared in.
Really?
Are we talking like drama narrative movies?
I just can't think of another one. Maybe he has
yeah.
a bunch, but that's the only one I can think of.
He was in Elizabethtown as a soundtrack artist.
Okay, so no.
I don't think that
we want
means in the
appearance,
movie.
not
Yeah.
like his music appeared on it.
Sure. Yeah.
On acting credits.
There's a movie called FM from
Never.
1978.
Sounds
When
like
a liberal music
documentary.
station's owner decides to introduce army recruitment ads, despite the protests of its manager, the rebellious DJs are determined to fight back no matter the cost.
Sounds kind of
And Tom
awesome.
Petty is in it
Tom Petty is in it.
as what's he credited as?
I mean, these are great questions, Kyle, that I refuse to answer.
Okay. All right, so we found one movie from the 70s featuring Tom Petty.
What's the
kinda
name of that
wanna see-
movie?
FM.
FM.
He plays Stanky in Made in Heaven.
1978.
1987. Oh,
No,
70. Yeah, it is
FM was
yeah.
78, yes.
After being dumped by his girlfriend, a boy runs away to California, but he ends up in heaven because he dies after trying to help a family from drowning in a river. In heaven, he'll meet a beautiful girl who has never reincarnated before.
Oh, so this movie has heaven and reincarnation in it. We're
Yes,
just
and he
taking a little
plays
bit from all the bags.
Stanky.
FM has a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. 20%.
Yeah, but you can't trust Rotten Tomatoes from the pre-internet era.
That's true.
Neil Young is also in this movie.
All right. Sounds like they got a bunch of old rockers who weren't that old at the time.
Yeah, 87.
Yeah,
Sure.
that was the prime for those guys.
87, 78, right?
We're talking two different movies again.
James,
78
pay
is
attention.
FM. Made in Heaven is 87. I know they're the same digits in them. That can be hard to comprehend, but
It is for me.
like James is looking for a movie from 78 about a guy who goes to heaven with Neil Young, and he cannot find it.
All right, guys. It's time to get into the movies we're going to talk about this week. They happen to both be Three Musketeers movies, rather.
Was that random? It just happened that way?
It just happened that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of like the Three Musketeers of podcasting, and so it's only fitting that we're the only podcast that ever talks about Three Musketeers movies.
How would you break us down? Which Musketeers are we?
Oh, I'm clearly D'Artagnan.
No,
Well,
of the three
he's not even
Musketeers.
one of the three.
He's not one of the three?
No, he's the fourth musketeer.
At this point, you have watched like four
How
Three
many?
Musketeers movies.
He's a musketeer.
don't- No,
yes,
hold
he's
on.
a musketeer.
There
but he's
might
not one
be
of the
four of
three
them, but they're the
musketeers.
Three Musketeers, all four of them.
James, you've watched four Three Musketeers movies with the exact same plot
Sure.
for this podcast, and you don't know that D'Artagnan is not one. Who are the three? I want you to name the Three Musketeers for me, James.
It's
There's less of the Three Musketeers than
Athos,
movies you've seen.
Aramis and Porthos.
It's much easier to say Kiefer Sutherland, Charlie Sheen, and Oliver Platt.
Nah, it's not. If you asked me to name the people from that movie, I couldn't have even told you all three of them.
Oh, I could still tell you who they are, but that's not what we're talking about.
That's
Okay, so
right.
are you Athos? Are you more of an Athos or an Aramis, or Porthos? Take the quiz.
I'm a D'Artagnan
You're D'Artagnan.
from the movie Three
Ugh.
Musketeers.
I mean, if anyone would be the D'Artagnan of this podcast, it would be me if I was the fourth one. So like
Why?
does
'Cause
everyone
you
want to
came
be
later?
D'Artagnan?
yes, like I'm just saying James is the farthest from D'Artagnan in this analogy whatsoever.
How dare you, sir?
And I'm not even going to be D'Artagnan because there's only three of us and he is the fourth musketeer.
Okay, then who am I then?
You're Milady.
All right, I'll take it.
Okay, no. James is Athos, Kyle is Porthos, and I'm Aramis.
I want to be Aramis. Why do you get to be Aramis?
I don't make the decisions. I just report them.
You give me more Porthos energy.
Wait,
What does that even mean?
he's the brave one.
Yeah. That's why you're the Porthos.
All right.
Yeah.
Isn't Aramis the one that wanted to become a priest or was a priest?
I believe he was going to become a priest
Yeah.
or something.
Well,
along
that's
those
you
lines.
to a
Yeah.
T.
I am the godly one of the three of us.
For sure.
Clearly.
For sure.
To the big guy.
All right. To my two D'Artagnans.
Yeah.
That sounds like a crappy like 80s sitcom. My two D'Artagnans.
Yeah.
Milady and the two D'Artagnans.
There's one Constance and two D'Artagnans. It's like whatever that show with John Ritter was. What am I thinking of?
I don't know, but
With
I
the
thought you were
roommates.
I thought you were riffing on My Two Dads.
No.
Three's Company.
Three's Company. Thank you. Yeah.
I thought you were doing two D'Artagnans in a pizza place.
Oh yeah, that could work. See, there's so many options to riff with to my two D'Artagnans.
Do you know when I think of Ryan Reynolds, that's what I think of still to this day?
That for a long time it was that until like he became Ryan Reynolds. But yeah, who was the other guy?
I forget him, but I know exactly what he looks like. I like.
It wasn't Dane Cook, right?
No.
No.
Okay.
I never watched that show.
It had Spin City energy, James.
I mean, by never, I mean like not normally. Like I seen an episode or two, and I was like, not for me.
Mhm. Was it originally called Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, and they
That
dropped
is-
a girl from the title?
Oh, I thought it was always called that.
Or maybe it was called Two Guys and a Girl, and they dropped a Pizza Place from the title. I feel like it was
Maybe.
shortened to Two Guys and a Girl, which
Maybe.
it's its own weird implications in the title.
Yeah. Three Musketeers.
All right, enough
All right,
rabbit
D'Artagnan,
trails.
take us away.
Let's get into it. This is our first Three Musketeers movie of this episode that we're going to discuss. It's the Three Musketeers : Milady. We're going to talk about it right after this clip.
C'est pas moi que vous vouliez sauver, mais Constance Bonacieux.
Où est-elle? Je sais que c'est vous qui l'avez enlevée.
Quel dommage que vous ne vouliez travailler pour moi.
Qu'avez-vous fait d'elle?
Vous me paierez cette offense.
Il me dira où elle est ou je jure de le tuer.
Prends garde, D'Artagnan. Cette femme t'a envoûté.
Nous sommes des tueurs, D'Artagnan, que cela vous plaise ou non.
Que chaque hérétique du royaume sache ce qu'il en coûte de défier le roi.
Mousquetaires, vous êtes soldats pour mourir. Je vous
vous emmène là où on veut.
That was The Three Musketeers, Milady. This is a 2023 epic action-adventure film directed by Martin Bolboyan, possibly, based on Alexandre Dumas's 1844 novel, The Three Musketeers. This movie stars Francois Civil, Vincent Cassel, Pio Marmoy, Romain Duris, and Eva Green, amongst others. The official IMDb plot synopsis for The Three Musketeers, Milady is D'Artagnan is forced to join forces with Milady to save Constance, who was kidnapped before his eyes. Why can I not speak?
Because we know D'Artagnan's illiterate, so it's okay if you have trouble reading.
But as war is declared and Athos, Porthos, and Aramis have already joined the front, a secret from the past shatters old alliances. They really needed to rewrite that first section, like forced to join forces. Come on, lazy. Can't use two force in the same within 4 words of each other.
Oh, you don't like that? It's 2 different tenses of force in 2 different meanings.
Forced to join forces. That's lazy.
You say forced to team up with
in the forest.
Somebody needs a thesaurus. That's for sure.
Well, let's rewrite it, James. What would you say?
All right. D'Artagnan is forced to join with Milady. Just drop the other forces.
Join.
Done.
Join in what sense?
To join with Milady to save Constance. You could just drop the second forces.
To join.
It's the exact same sentence.
The forces is implied then. Join forces.
No, he's forced to join Milady.
Why can't we just say
that's
D'Artagnan?
The important part of the word force is he's being forced to do it.
He's not forced. He voluntarily
No,
joins her.
No.
I
He
feel like
joins
force
forces
usually
with her
means-
because he wants to find out where Constance is, not because he wants to join forces.
He freed
with
her voluntarily, not because of anything he needed.
I'm saying he had to. Okay, we'll get to it.
How about against his better judgment, D'Artagnan must join forces with Milady
Sure, that would work too.
In the forest.
in the forest.
Right. A little bit of background before we get into what we thought about the Three Musketeers, Milady. Maybe, I don't know how many episodes ago back, but maybe 3 or 4 months back, we reviewed a movie titled The Three Musketeers, D'Artagnan. And that is the movie that comes before this one. This is a direct sequel to that movie. The only reason I bring this up is because these are not like big Hollywood movie theater movies. That first one didn't get a theatrical release here in the US. Neither did this one. They're both in French. And we saw the first one, and I think the general consensus is that we enjoyed it, right? We liked this take.
I gave it 4 stars.
I gave it the first one 4 stars also.
I don't remember what I gave it, but sounds in the zone, I would say, of what I gave it to. And so we learned that there was a sequel coming out that was filmed at the same time as the first one. And it came out and we got a chance to see it, and we did. And that is part 2, Milady. So,
which refers to Milady de Winter.
Right. If you're curious what we thought about the first one in detail, go ahead and take a listen to that earlier episode. Otherwise, we're going to assume that you know the basics of the Three Musketeers premise. Should we say that? Or should we give them like a 20-second recap of what Three Musketeers is?
I mean, I would love James to give a recap of it since he doesn't even know who the Three Musketeers are.
D'Artagnan is part of the Three Musketeers, all right? He's the 4th member. I'll give you that. But if the group is called Three Musketeers, he's still a part of the group.
No, the sequel to the 70s movie was called The Fourth Musketeer, or The Four Musketeers.
I think that's what the book is called also, The Fourth Musketeer.
That's fine. I'm just saying, when people ask about the Three Musketeers, D'Artagnan's in the mix. He's one of the Musketeers.
No, literally, there are 3 Musketeers and D'Artagnan.
Yeah.
There's lots of Musketeers.
No, but he's not even, D'Artagnan's not even a Musketeer. He just wants to be.
At some point.
Didn't they get disbanded?
He is not a musketeer in this series, but he does become a musketeer in the story. Yes,
Sure.
but yeah, I think in these movies he has not made it to the musketeer stage.
Just because you're a musketeer does not mean you're one of the three musketeers.
Oh my goch.
Right?
Right.
Not
It's
why
like
we're
the three
here.
tenors. You can't just choose any. There's tons of tenors. Of course, there's tons of tenors, but there's three tenors.
Three named tenors.
Yes.
You guys are ridiculous. Okay, so in the storyline of the Three Musketeers, you got these three musketeers. And then there's this fourth guy who's not a musketeer named D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan, what should we say to make this 20 seconds long?
He teams up with the three. He wants to be a musketeer. He has to prove himself, so he teams up with the Three Musketeers to stop plotting that's happening against King Louis XIII.
Yes. Also falls in love with Constance.
And
Yes, who is a handmaiden to the queen.
And over the course of the first movie, Constance gets kidnapped, and nobody knows by who or where she's gone, basically.
Yes. She's kidnapped because she witnesses the attempted assassination. She finds out who the assassinators were who tried to kill the king.
Right.
Right.
Fast forward to this movie.
Assassins. I don't think assassinator is a word.
Sure. In this movie, you got the Three Musketeers plus D'Artagnan, and they're trying to find Constance, and they're also trying to find out who tried to kill the king, essentially.
Correct. Yes.
And that leads them to Milady, who's kind of like an assassin or an assassiness. And Milady is it spoiler to talk about who she actually is?
Yes, we can just say she's an agent for the Cardinal, because Cardinal Richelieu is sort of pulling the strings in the background.
Okay. There we go. So the movie picks up there and attempts to resolve all of those open threads. That being said, what'd you guys think of the Three Musketeers, Milady?
So, as we stated before, I really enjoyed the first one.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about our experience with Three Musketeers, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But the first one I enjoyed. I thought the style of fighting, the cinematography, how they did like their swashbuckling fights was really cool. And I liked the balance they had with sort of all the politics, the plotting that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And this one gave me that same swashbuckling fights that I really liked. Especially there's that one. It was a fake oneer, but it was still done well in the burning house.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought that fight was done was choreographed really well and was really enjoyable to watch. But this movie, the plotting seems, I don't know if it was confusing, but it's definitely denser what was happening. And it felt anticlimactic. Whereas the first one resolved with this big, assassination attempt against the king and a big fight that broke out. This one felt like a much smaller scale. And as much as you said this one attempts to resolve what happened from the first movie, it really feels like a middle chapter where there is a resolution to a smaller story, but still the larger politics, the larger bad guys are still working in the shadows. And I guess I was kind of dissatisfied with the pacing and how this movie ended.
Sure. I mean,
I don't know if they're making a third, but it didn't feel like it still doesn't feel like a complete story.
I mean, there's a legit cliffhanger at the end. That like
Correct.
They're
yeah.
teasing a third movie of some sort or some continuation.
I was always under the understanding that 3 movies were planned. Is that not true?
From everything I've read on Wikipedia, it's always referred to the 2.
Okay.
So I don't know if there is a third. Like James, you mentioned that they seem to film these 2 back to back.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if these 2 are successful, they'll greenlight a third. But I have not seen anything about a third.
I believe there's a lot of Musketeer books.
Oh, there's a lot of stories to tell for sure. So there is more material out there if they make a third one.
There are 3 main novels.
I felt like this didn't really resolve the story that was given to us in the first movie.
Sure.
So, especially, one of my favorite characters in the Three Musketeers story is the Cardinal. And definitely in these movies, he's much more sidelined. He's not, at least at the forefront of the villainy as you see him in other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about you, Zach?
I thought this movie roughly was similar to the other movie.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit less fun.
Yeah.
And a little more plotting, I would say, a lot more talking. But in general, I thought it was the same kind of rough quality as the other one. And definitely gave us, maybe a deeper look at each of the characters than we had in the first movie. Some more insight into those characters that, we won't necessarily talk about. But yeah, I think I enjoyed this movie. Maybe not as much as the first one, but I thought it wasn't a huge drop. It was roughly in line with the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally agree with you guys. I think maybe the first one had that element of surprise, right? You're like kind of discovering this world. You're discovering these characters and the way that they're going to tell this story. I felt like the first one had a little more wide-eyedness to it, probably because you're following D'Artagnan quite a bit in the first movie, and the world is new to him as well. So it's a little bit like a confident fish out of the water type of thing, where he's discovering these people and you're experiencing who they are through his eyes. And by the time you get to this movie, there's less of that and more of the perspective of the other characters. And none of them are quite as fun and innocent as he is in the first movie. So you get to spend a decent amount of time with Milady and Vincent Cassel's character, Athos. And I kind of feel like the other two got sidelined in this movie. You don't get much backstory on the other two. It's mostly Athos and D'Artagnan, I would say.
Isn't Porthos injured for a good portion of this movie in a hospital?
I don't remember that. Do you remember that, Zach?
He was injured in the 1970s version.
Oh, I watched them back to back, so they're starting to bleed together.
Sure,
so,
that makes sense.
Okay, you're right.
But the vibe, this reminds me of like any trilogy, even though we're not sure there's a third one. It kind of feels like the dark middle, where they're resolving some things that weren't that big, but also opening up new threads. And sometimes that can be less satisfying and feel a little underwhelming, because there isn't like that big third act moment. Although I felt like this one had a third act moment, and then they went a little longer. Like the scene in the barn, that fight that Kyle mentioned, that's a oneer, is pretty great. I mean, the movie was cooking for me at that point. I was like, man, I miss real special effects. You know what I mean? Like the fire in that in that sequence, it was clear that they built a building that had actual fire effects, and then they fought in it and faked a really long sequence, basically. And it was great. It was awesome. And then the movie like went on for like another 20 minutes after that and didn't really crescendo much higher than they had gotten during that fight. And so as a result, because they didn't sew everything up, and because they give you like this little prologue, right? That comes after, or is that before?
Epilogue.
Epilogue.
They give you this little epilogue that actually opens more doors than closes them. It just kind of was like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we building up to an even bigger fight? Nope, it's over. All right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it felt like we were spending more time setting up a third movie that I can't find any evidence is happening as of right now.
Sure. But I still love the production design and the general darkness of everything that was going on. Not that it was super dark, but just that it's a movie that takes itself seriously, but also occasionally has jokes and jolliness to it and a little bit of irreverence, just enough to kind of take you out for a second and make you realize you're watching a swashbuckling movie, not something that's, The Dark Knight or something trying to be deadly serious, just trying to be kind of serious, I would say. And overall, I enjoyed it. And I hope they make a third. I would watch a third of this. How about you guys? Would you watch another one?
I mean,
Yeah,
if
I
it's
totally
between
would.
this and Rebel Moon, then yeah, definitely watch it.
Okay.
No, I totally would. And maybe we've only gotten one version of the Man in the Iron Mask. So maybe one of those.
Sure.
Because that's part of the Three Musketeers story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kyle
You
and
know,
I
we might
bounce that
that
one
might be-
around for possibly watching it this week. The Man in the
Oh, we
Iron
should.
Mask.
Yeah, so thrown out there. Okay, let's say right now, if they make a third one, when we review it, let's pair it with Man in the Iron Mask, which I've actually never seen.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
I've seen it, but short of Leonardo DiCaprio being in it, I couldn't tell you anything that happened in it. Which, take that for what it's worth. Yeah. Anything else with this movie that we're missing?
Early on in the movie, it had this one shot, and I want more of these shots in more movies. It's him jumping off a castle wall into a moat.
Is it the
And,
Bourne
like,
shot?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
the Bourne shot.
Yep.
He jumps into the water, and the cameraman jumps with him, following
Yeah.
him down. And it's the same from like that Jason Bourne movie. And I love that kind of filmmaking. It's so physical, and I love it.
I believe they had one of those during the barn fight also.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, it was hard to tell if that was an actual camera jump or if that was a CG transition to the next moment.
Yeah, the shot where they roll off the second floor and down into the bottom of the barn, and then the cameraman follows them
Falls
with the camera.
them.
I think there's a
Yeah.
cut right as they hit the ground, but it was great.
Yeah.
How, just from a special effects, practical effects standpoint, how do they make a barn like that on fire, but with having no smoke and not have the fire spread?
I'm going to make a guess, and then James, who's probably more informed, can tell us the answer. But I'm assuming that it's it's like fire bars. So nothing in there is actually flammable. They're burning gas, which is going to be smokeless. So it looks like they're burning wood and combustible things, but in actuality, it's just like I bet you there's a switch they can hit and all the fire just turns off.
Okay, that makes sense. So everything is not actually wood. It is, and it's powered by gas. That makes sense.
Right.
Correct.
And then
James, is that what you were gonna?
Yeah. And then they piped every post in that place, every spot that they want the fire to be. They've piped all of that and hidden the pipes, and they just turn it off and turn it on and know exactly where to stand and where not to stand based on the choreography.
Nice.
I'm sure it's still rather hot in there though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet for sure.
Why don't they make houses out of non-flammable material?
Cost.
Is cinder block more expensive than wood?
Well, I think it's also, I don't know if cinder block long term is more structurally sound than wood. We're talking a solid piece of wood versus a bunch of stacked cinder blocks.
I don't know. My condo's cinder blocks.
And it's crumbling all around you.
No, it's not crumbling. It's fine.
I mean, but how often do houses burn down anymore? It's so much rarer.
There's
There's
one
so
in our
much
neighborhood.
other things in the house that are flame retardants and are protected from flame.
I don't know. There's one on our street. We call it the burnt down house, and we visit it like every other day.
It burnt to the ground?
No, just completely hollowed out.
When did it burn?
Maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
Right, but the houses in your neighborhood are all wood, right?
They're concrete block for the first level, and then wood on the second level.
Okay.
Really? They're concrete block the first level?
Yeah.
Really? Interesting.
Not entirely.
That's pretty normal
shocking to
here.
me. In Florida.
Well, okay. Yeah, you're in Florida, so.
Right.
Is it because of water? Is that why they do concrete for the first level?
Hurricanes? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either.
All right.
I mean, we'll get
is-
to the bottom of it in our 3-part series. Construction materials and how they're used.
Actually, this is a 50-part series. We can go state by state.
Yeah.
I there were multiple times in this movie, which is clearly not completely practical effects. There's tons of background removals and digital mats and stuff like that going on here. But then there's other times where you're like, why don't they make movies like this in the US anymore? Right? Like, why don't we get Marvel movies with like a barn fight like this one has, where you're like actually invested because it feels like they're actually there doing the thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen a movie like that pull off a practical effect fight scene that lasted multiple minutes with an interesting camera shot.
Mhm.
And make it entirely practical. I was just really impressed. Like, if you want to watch the movie just for that and you're a fan of action, I think it might be worth watching the whole movie just for that one sequence. I don't know what you'd call it. You know, when they're in the middle of the town, they're breaking in the middle of the night, and there's like a big fight in the town center type area. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That scene was good too, and was felt very practical, I would say. Other than when somebody hits the tower above them. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I want to see more of these.
Yeah, I hope they make a third. I would like to see more.
Absolutely. Anything else with the Three Musketeers : Milady? All right. Let's letterbox this. The last one scored pretty high. What are you guys going to give?
I can't go as high as the first one.
No?
So I'm going to 3.5 on this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm also going to go 3.5.
I will go 3.5 as well.
All right.
3.5 across the board for the Three Musketeers : Milady, as we did when we reviewed the first movie in this series. We watched another Three Musketeers movie from the past.
We watched the Disney one last time, the 1993 one.
We watched the Disney live action version last time. This time we watched the 1973 live action version, directed by Richard Lester. We're going to get into it right after this clip.
The Three Musketeers, the most read book in the world after the Bible. Filmed with a cast that dazzles the screen with their brilliant performances.
There are 6 of them and we are only 3.
No. 4.
What is your name, youngster?
D'Artagnan.
Athos? Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan.
Forward! One for all for one.
That was The Three Musketeers from 1973, a swashbuckler film based on the 1844 novel by Alexandre Dumas. This movie was directed by Richard Lester and stars Oliver Reed, Raquel Welch, Richard Chamberlain, Michael York, Frank Finlay, Christopher Lee, Geraldine Chaplin, Simon Ward, Faye Dunaway, and Charlton Heston. Those names are way easier to read than the last movie. The official IMDb plot synopsis for The Three Musketeers from 1973 is: a young swordsman comes to Paris and faces villains, romance, adventure, and intrigue with 3 musketeer friends.
Oh, so he's not one of them.
He's a musketeer.
No, James.
Eventually.
Everyone is saying.
Eventually.
James, everyone is saying he's a musketeer. Everyone.
Right.
We all agree he's a musketeer.
Yeah.
We're saying he's not one of the 3 musketeers.
He's a 3 musketeer.
No,
he's not a 3 musketeer. There's only 3 of them.
He's in with the 3 musketeers.
Yeah, so now they're the 4 musketeers.
They happen to have a 4th, but when they got their name, they were originally 3.
They've retired the name.
They didn't have a name. They were never a name. They were never like.
Well,
we're
they were
the
never
3
named. Then he's
Musketeers.
definitely a 3 musketeer, because you're saying it doesn't even matter. The number.
I believe in this movie they are named. Another character says, "Oh, you're with the 3 Musketeers," or something
really?
like
Okay.
that. So this movie did name them the 3 Musketeers, as in they were like a clique, which they kind of are a clique anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. In some iterations, the thing that binds them most together is that they all duel him at the same time. Otherwise, they're just like three of the many musketeers.
Which is, I think, in every adaptation I've seen, is there always is the duel, and then the Cardinals troops show up, and that's what binds them as a group. Yeah.
Sure.
Like you need that. That's their origin story right there.
Yeah.
Right. So this is kind of the classic telling, as these guys have been describing. You got D'Artagnan, who is new to this world, and he decides that he wants to be a musketeer. He meets the titular Three Musketeers over time. He impresses them and becomes a part of their group. And then meanwhile, the church is plotting against the king, and there's a lot of, I don't know, politics, swashbuckling politics, backstabbing, and a lot of loyalty to the king and trying to figure out what's going on, essentially. And then at the core of it is this love story between D'Artagnan and Constance.
Which was weird in this movie.
Was it?
Wasn't she married?
Yeah, she was married.
There was some twists, I would say, some twists and turns. So what'd you guys think of the 1973 take on the Three Musketeers?
James, what did you think?
I enjoyed it, but for very different reasons, I think, than I've enjoyed any other Three Musketeers movie. Like, this is easily the most comedic version of the Three Musketeers I've personally seen, short of like Mickey and the Three Musketeers, like the cartoon from Disney, that I don't even think is like a full movie. I think that's like an hour or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a pretty wacky version of this story. At times it felt very Monty Python-esque, I would say.
I was getting Mel Brooks vibes.
Sure.
But I think same vein, though. Yeah.
It didn't go fully there, but it towed the line for sure of going into those styles of comedy.
I couldn't always tell if it was intentionally funny sometimes or just was funny.
Yeah. I
think it was intentional.
I think it was mostly intentional, but like there was other times where Michael York would do a line reading that was just kind of campy. I'm like, was that on purpose, or was that just edited that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think that was intentional. Personally. Especially since Richard Lester is like a comedy director. Like that's what he does. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
What else has he done?
Hard Day's Night.
He's most well known for Beatles movies. I think he did 2 Beatles movies, right? Hard Day's Night.
I think he did Help also.
Right.
And this, I was reading, this actually was originally conceived for the Beatles.
Yeah.
Which I think is why it has the tone that it has.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Beatles, for whatever reason, were not in this movie. So instead they cast
That's
other
really
actors.
funny. What was the other famous movie that the Lord of the Rings? The Beatles were going to be in the Lord of the Rings.
Really?
Yeah. No, I thought they were going to be. Yes. Maybe. No, I thought it was Jungle Book. I thought they were going to be in Jungle Book.
Maybe, but they were supposed to be the 4 hobbits.
They're supposed to be the 4 hobbits in Lord of the Rings. Okay.
Yeah.
Aren't there like 4 singing animals in the Jungle Book at one point? Like in the forest, in the jungle. Could be 4 monkeys.
I don't know. There's not 4 monkeys that sing.
Anyway, yeah.
I don't remember.
But yeah, so like I was watching this movie and I agree. It was kind of wacky. I'm like, this is sort of a weird take. And then as I was reading that it was a Beatles vehicle, I'm like, okay. It kind of makes sense now. I don't know if it works with this cast, but I can imagine the Beatles in this movie.
It's quite the cast. Like Charlton Heston as Richelieu. It's pretty wild.
I can't take Charlton Heston seriously.
With that accent?
Right. Like, well, because every movie he's in, he always just like delivers his lines the same way. Like he plays Charlton Heston every movie he's in. And every time I see him act, I just know I'm watching Charlton Heston. He does not disappear into his characters whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Some actors, they get known for one thing and that's what they do, and even if they could do something else, nobody wants to see it. So
I don't know. I mean, is Charlton Heston a good actor? That's the question. Or is he just a famous actor?
My money's on Chris or Clint Eastwood. I like Clint Eastwood better.
Sure, but I think Charles.
Those are the two I
Heston
compare to each other.
Those are the two what?
I compare those two to each other.
Oh, as in Clint Eastwood always plays himself?
No. In my mind, Charlton Heston and Clint Eastwood would be up for the same parts, and then sometimes they beat each other. That's what happens in my mind.
Okay. I much I would have seen Clint Eastwood as the Cardinal in this movie.
That'd be great.
Charlton Heston was awesome in Planet of the Apes. I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
no, I couldn't like he has such like an old Hollywood way of acting, which does not fit into new Hollywood.
Well, Planet of the Apes was in New Hollywood, so done.
It was it was 67 or 68. It was the same year as 2001. So
yeah, so the last throes of old Hollywood.
Right.
This movie was pretty zany.
Yeah.
And seeing York, I mean, he looks so old, even though I'm sure he's a lot younger then. But he looks so old because I just think of him from like Austin Powers or Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Was he in Cabaret?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think he was the guy. Yep.
I really enjoyed the take on Raquel Welch's character, the Constance character. I thought that was interesting.
As a klutz?
As a klutz and like the angle that she was married to the innkeeper or whatever he was. I don't know what the husband was.
Yeah, he was sure we recall. He was renting the room.
Right.
Yeah.
That she was married to him, but yet clearly not faithful to him, I would say. And she seemed older than D'Artagnan. To me, I don't know, maybe, or maybe she was young for her husband. I don't know.
Well, he was definitely old.
Right. There was some weirdness going on, I would say, between that little triangle that was going on. And that was not a part of any Three Musketeer movie that I've seen recently. And so I enjoyed that spin. I mean, it's hard to really talk about this movie without just seeing how different it is in tone from like even the Disney version, which is lighter than the French versions that we've been talking about. This one's even lighter. I mean, the scene with the dog chessboard is wacky.
That was,
you know what I mean, there are like
that. Yeah.
There are a couple things in this movie where you're like, what is this doing in this movie? Like this is borderline Mel Brooks-ish type material that's just kind of jammed in here and there, and it never really gets very serious, I would say.
Any movie that has a monkey riding a dog, I'm in.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, this had the very Monty Python-esque moment where Michael York was like trying to stop someone on horseback, so he jumps onto a swinging rope and just completely misses and it swings back, and like it's right out of Sir Lancelot in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, just swinging back and forth.
Yeah, and then he lands in the mud, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That same sequence. That's towards the beginning too. That was like the first inklings where I was like, oh, okay, that's what this movie's going to be.
Right. I will say that for me, the wackiness kind of grated on me after a while.
Really?
Because because it was kind of walking this weird line between trying to be a serious telling of the Three Musketeers story and then just throwing in these comedic elements. And I think I had wished, as I was watching this movie, I was wishing that this was like a Mel Brooks, almost a parody, and they just went full into it. Like, okay, let's do the Spaceballs treatment of Three Musketeers instead of walking this weird line. But there were a couple moments, like when they have the fight in the tavern to like steal a bunch of food. I thought that was super fun and clever. And like that was a moment where the wackiness kind of served the plot, if that makes any sense. And then there's this little moment, I don't know if you guys caught this, where it's towards the end and D'Artagnan like climbs into a room that's full of a bunch of guards and he like goes to like shake the carpets to knock them all down, and the carpet rips, and then they just quickly ADR someone saying, he's torn our carpet. And like that got an actual laugh out of me just because it was such a weird comedy moment.
Do you think that was on accident that he tore the carpet?
No, I think it was planned. I think that was part of the wackiness of like he's gonna do this, cool move where he's gonna rip the carpet out from them, they're gonna fall over, and then the carpet tears away.
Sure.
But I do wonder who ADR did the "he's torn our carpet" because that was comedic genius right there.
Sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I may have enjoyed this even more than Milady.
Really?
Yeah, just because the take was so different, and I felt like I was like the act of watching the movie was more exploratory because of the change in tone, like the complete change in tone. That I was more interested in how they were going to tell the story I already knew in this movie than I was knowing the details of the story that I didn't know in Milady, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Like there was nothing terribly suspenseful in the threads that were left open for me at the end of D'Artagnan that continued in Milady that I was like dying to see type of thing. And not necessarily that I was dying to see how this 1973 version played out, but I was, especially after that dog chessboard moment, just like, okay, this movie can literally do anything. Like there's no limits to what they might do because they've put their cards on the table with this one sequence for me.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that experience of knowing like this could be super fun. Not sure it totally went there over the course of the rest of the movie, but I think they were trying to do something interesting with the material. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, I enjoyed the sensibility. I think it's kind of a fun 70s wackiness that I think was fun. If this had been a straight like drama, I think it would have been a little tedious to watch the same story play out that we've already seen several times. I like kind of James, I never knew what was going to happen next, really. I really liked the sets, like really kind of beautiful sets and stuff that they'd be at. Probably true for both the movies we watched this week. And in the cast, I mean, it was kind of a lot of people in it.
Right.
It was fun to see them in those positions. So I think on the whole, I did enjoy it.
I did like that multiple times in this movie, main characters seem to suffer mortal wounds. And then they show up in the next scene with just like their arm in a sling.
Sure.
I was like, oh, okay. Put your arm in a sling. You can, anything can be healed.
All right. Yeah. Also, at the end of this movie, the 1973 version, they play a little mini trailer for the next one because they
Back to the Future 3 it.
Yeah, they Back to the Future 3'd this. They filmed the first movie and the second movie back to back, much like D'Artagnan and Milady from, the recent French movies. They did the same thing back in the 70s, and they literally put a trailer right before the credits at the end of this 1973 version for part 2. And I feel like, was it with you guys? We were talking about this. Like, I have a distinct memory of watching Back to the Future 2 in movie theaters and then seeing the trailer play for Back to the Future 3 at the end of it.
Right. Yeah.
And we had talked about if there's any other movie that's done that before, or if Back to the Future 2 was the first one to do that. And I don't think we came up with another movie that had done that before, but clearly there's this one from 1973 that did it.
So this was originally supposed to be one movie,
Yes.
and it was like 3 hours long. And so they just made it 2 movies, and they didn't even like tell the cast until it was already a done deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the controversy behind this is the cast got paid for one movie.
Yeah, and I read on Wikipedia that like a bunch of litigation from this movie actually set a standard that says like you can't split your movie into 2 unless you make up for it financially.
Yeah.
With the actors.
Who knew we'd watch such a groundbreaking movie this week?
I know. Another interesting production note is the cast of this movie, the vast majority of them reteamed like 20 years later, something like that, maybe even 30 years later, and made a third movie in the series.
Well, there's a but to that story though.
Oh, what's the but?
They never released it.
They never released it?
Well, okay, so I was reading that they were in the late 80s. They filmed a third one. And I think it was the guy who played like D'Artagnan's squire who's kind of following him around for most of the movie. I believe someone, I think it was him, died on horseback filming a scene.
Roy Kinnear.
Yeah, Roy Kinnear. And then the movie, they just canned the movie after that. And I think Richard Lester never directed the movie after that. So I don't believe there is a third one that ever was released because of the death of Roy Kinnear.
Released in cinemas. 1989. April 1989.
Oh, so they did
never got a US theatrical release.
Okay.
So you're right.
Okay.
Was never released here.
What was it called?
Gave the film its US debut on Cablevision USA Network 2 years later. So never got a theatrical review. 2 years after 1989, they dumped it to cable.
Okay. What was it called?
The Return of the Musketeers. Years later, in a career interview, Lester said, "I really won't talk about The Return of the Musketeers. I never have, and I won't now, but I think you can draw your own conclusions."
Wow.
Evidently, he was upset.
Well, yeah, someone died on his set. Like, I think he would be, I can imagine that kind of wanting to kill your joy in filmmaking.
Sure. I mean, didn't stop Steven Spielberg or a bunch of the guys who were involved in the Twilight Zone.
But that didn't happen on camera, though. That was just like
that happened on camera.
I thought it. But were they filming a scene, or were people just being transported from point A to point B?
No.
They were filming.
They were filming a scene, and it was
on a sound stage,
and it was an adult and a child.
Well, yeah, okay. I always thought it was just like a helicopter accident transport. I didn't realize it was during.
No. They were shooting a helicopter.
Oh.
I think the victims were on the ground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the helicopter went too far nose down or something like that. From what I understand.
Oh, okay. That's grisly.
Yes, it was not a good scene.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
I hope they destroyed that footage. Like, that's the kind of stuff where just destroy it. No one needs to see it or hold on to that.
I'm assuming
that's destroyed evidence. Hopefully eventually they destroyed it. But
okay, that's a good point. I hope that gets destroyed because no one needs to see that.
Right. Sure. I doubt it got destroyed, but they seem to have a lock on it one way or another. Yeah. Anyway, Return of the Three Musketeers, 60% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I was I think I was one that suggested this, and it was because it seemed to get such positive reviews, but I think for me it was just a little too wacky. But I understand that you guys embrace the wackiness and enjoyed the take on it. Right. The story wise, like they did this story in the first D'Artagnan movie, so it's not a new story for any of us.
Yeah, and I think if I'm gonna watch another one of these, I want it to be a different style, and that's what they gave me, basically.
Right. Yep.
Same story, but they definitely put a twist on it compared to the recent versions that I've seen. So, anything else with the Three Musketeers from 1973? All right, let's letterbox it. What are you guys gonna give 1973 Three Musketeers?
I'm gonna go 3 stars.
Yeah, I'll go 3 stars.
I'll go 3.5. About the same as I liked Milady. I really enjoyed the idea that like this movie exists and it's out there, and it reminds me of a time that's just gone. You know what I mean? Like this type of comedy, this type of filmmaking, it doesn't fly today. We're not getting it anymore, right? We're not getting the Mel Brooks-ish type stuff anymore. That type of parody, or maybe we are, and like I just am not watching it. I don't know. We're definitely not getting it as like a part of mass market, I would say.
I mean, when I think of like comedy action movies that come out now, it's just Deadpool.
Right.
I can't think of these sort of not serious Like, oh yeah, this is fun. Let's have.
What about John Wick?
But I mean, John Wick's not comedy. Like, it definitely has moments of lightness, but it's a pretty funny. It's a pretty heavy movie at times too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're not even getting comedies in movie theaters anymore, really, unless they're like adventure comedies. Like straight comedies.
What about No Hard Feelings?
That did come out in a theater. Yeah.
What was that? Was it not Kristen Wiig, Sandra Bullock, The Lost City or something like that?
Yeah, wasn't that direct to streaming? Didn't we watch that streaming?
But maybe it was. Okay. Like, that's the kind of movie I feel like is in the same vein as this. Of sort of a light comedic adventure. Oh,
see, they're definitely both comedic, but they're very different styles of comedy. To me.
Are you talking more like just like the physical pratfalls and things that happen in this movie?
Yeah, and the borderline parody.
Okay.
Like the Monty Python-esque moments in this movie, you're just not getting that style of humor anymore. Which makes sense. I mean, Richard Lester, I'm pretty sure, is a British dude. It's a very specific sensibility, I would say, Monty Python and him, with a little bit of Mel Brooks mixed in. Anyway, that's 2 Three Musketeers movies. Milady and the version from 1973. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you guys are getting into the Three Musketeers as we are. Why are we into the Three Musketeers all of a sudden? We went 10 years of doing this podcast, never once talked about a Three Musketeers movie.
All I know is I disappear for a week and I come back and you guys have slated us for 2 more Musketeer movies.
Yeah, this is part of our long con.
Yeah. We're trying to make Three Musketeers more relevant.
I think for me, just like growing up with the 93 Disney version, as well as, I discussed them last time. I'm a fan of Dumas. Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite books. So I guess for me, like these swashbuckling movies are sort of in my movie DNA.
Sure.
So I like coming back to this well.
Nice. I am curious too, for the listeners out there, is there a movie older than Three Musketeers from 1973 that has a trailer in the movie for the next film? Because so far, 1973 is the record.
Yeah.
Is there any released before that had footage from the sequel or the next movie in the first movie? Just throwing it out there. I'm curious. Thank you for listening to this episode 631 of the Cinereelists podcast. We appreciate your listenership. Don't forget, there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Go check it out there. Subscribe and listen while you watch. Watch while you listen. That's probably better. Watch while you listen. You could also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support us there. Get extra after show audio. Also, you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate that. If you got an iPhone, just click review at the bottom of this episode and leave us 5 stars. Also, you could send us a listener email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. If you send us an email, we will talk about it on the podcast and answer your email. Send us a comment, a question, a list suggestion, a movie suggestion, any of those kinds of things. We appreciate getting via email. You can also follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Cinereelists, or you could follow me on my personal Twitter, Blue Sky, or Letterboxd account at YoJRB.
You can follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd at Shaban.
Find me on Letterboxd at Peter SKB.
Next week, we will be bringing you nothing. We won't be here. Because are we all going to places that start with the letter M? I know Kyle's going to Minneapolis. I'm going to Milwaukee. And Zach's going to
Toledo, Ohio.
He broke the pattern.
But we are all going to be in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And James is going to be an hour and a half away from where I live, but I'm going 4 hours in the other direction. So
will the 3 of us, short of Georgia recently, be the closest the 3 of us have been together next weekend?
Yeah, I'd say we're all in the same part of the country.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Interesting.
short of last year. Yes.
Well, we were in the same physical location.
I know.
Also, James and I live like 10 minutes from each other.
Yeah, but
Right, but he lives
like,
so
the
far
three of
away.
us-
Right.
Well, yeah, but Kyle also visits here occasionally.
That's true. Occasionally he does. Although you haven't visited since you've been on the podcast, right? As a official host.
Yeah, he has.
You have?
Yep.
You didn't tell me? What's up with that?
But we did. He filmed he played Taskmaster.
Oh, that's
with you.
right. We recorded an
Yeah, the
episode.
Taskmaster episode.
Man, I'm getting old. I forget these things.
That was like during pandemic. That was like more quarantine for some time, and then go to Florida. Yeah.
That wasn't during the pandemic. Well, it was during the pandemic.
It was, I mean, it was like, I would say it was the waning days of the pandemic, but it was definitely still a pandemic. I still had to wear a mask on the airplane. So
Sure.
Jacobs has
Also-
still not met people.
James, you need to come over more often because Julie the other day said like, so are you like growing out your beard like James? And I was like, no, my beard is nothing like James's. You need to see James's more often if you think mine looks like his.
I think she just means she's trying to figure out what your end goal is here. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
well,
sure.
it's nowhere close to where you're at.
No.
I would agree with that, but it is as long as, maybe not as long as you've ever had it, but not too far off. You're probably a good 3 weeks to a month off from as big as I've seen you have it.
No, this is as long as it's ever been.
Really? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
she wants to know how long are you going. And so she's using James as her marker. Like, are you trying to grow a beard like James?
No,
Sure.
I think she thought that our beards probably look similar.
I don't think. I don't think she thinks that. I think she's just trying to figure out how long you're going to go here.
Right.
Sure.
I think
Yeah,
she's fishing for an end game here, so she
Exactly.
knows what to expect. What should
But
what should we expect, Zach? What are we doing here? We're going full.
We're waiting for Zach's depression to lift, and so he can shave it, and then
Once I'm ready to turn things around.
yeah, once he's ready to turn his life
Sure.
around, the beard will come off.
All right, fair enough. Thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time in 2 weeks. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.